then is that we have been asked not to communicate directly with the state's witnesses. So whenever we wanted to interview Agent Schwalls or any other people, we had to go through the state to set that up, and they had to be present. So we can't just call Jason Schwalls and talk to him about a new court date and make sure that that's okay. The state also had talked with them about these prior court dates to make sure that those court dates were okay with them, and had let the court know that the witnesses were available. When the court set these dates, March 8th and 9th, there are 5 witnesses that we had previously subpoenaed are known to be the witnesses that we want to call. At that time, there was no statement or anything that Mr. Schwalls, Agent Schwalls, would be unavailable for these hearing dates today and tomorrow. And so when we reminded him of the hearing dates, Ms. Hart responded, and Agent Schwalls has never responded to us, but Ms. Hart responded that she had talked with Agent Schwalls some time ago and knew that he was in training during this week. We were not made aware of that. And so all of our communications, again, have to go through the district attorney's office. We're not able to just contact the GBI agent per the state's wishes, per their wishes on their witnesses. So they control those witnesses. And so we just found out yesterday that Agent Schwalls is apparently on leave or doing something this week, some type of training. The state apparently knew about that some time ago. I don't know when, but we were just made aware of it. We need Agent Schwalls for that motion. So we're perfect.
For which motion?
The Giglio motion, Judge. Motion to reveal the deal. He was one of the 5 people that was present during that meeting, and so we need his testimony on that. We have no problem taking his testimony at a later time. We would just ask that the court reserve any ruling on that and allow us to take his testimony.
So, it sounds to me like your position is he is illegally defying his subpoena.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
But
I'm sorry.
We just want his testimony. So, if we're not asking for him to be attached, we're just asking for the court to not rule until he testifies.
Okay.
And so we've got the other witnesses, so I think it would be, we have no problem continuing with the 4 witnesses that we have and then leaving it open for Agent Schwalls to testify. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hart.
Judge, we don't object to Agent Schwalls testifying at another time. However, I would like to address some of the statements made by defense counsel. The state has never requested that defense counsel not communicate with the witnesses directly. Many of the witnesses themselves have requested or have indicated that they would only be interviewed as to the content of their testimony without us present. But in fact, there has been communication between Ms. Merchant and Agent Schwalls throughout the course of this trial. We know that she has his cell phone number. They have communicated via text messages. And on top of that, they have his email, which is how they sent him a subpoena yesterday. Agent Schwalls is not trying to refuse to testify, but after the case was continued last time, he was never made aware that he was needed today until yesterday.
Her position is you should have done that.
Exactly, and I absolutely disagree with that. And of course, I will go into why I will let the court know that I don't believe it's my job to do their job, unless you'd like me to. But the point is, Judge, that we didn't intend to call him. It's our position he, in fact, wasn't there when the meeting occurred that they allege created this deal. We obviously disagree a deal was there. But Agent Schwalls was not in the room. He's previously testified to that at least twice during the Bo Dukes trial and the pretrial hearings. That being said, he's perfectly fine to testify, but he has to be told if he's supposed to be in court. The first time he knew that he was allegedly supposed to be in court today was yesterday at 2:30. I received an email from defense counsel that Agent Schwalls was under subpoena. And so I called him and said, they're saying you've been subpoenaed. I need to, what is going on with this? Simply because I wanted to make sure that if he was supposed to be there, there wasn't a confusion that we had caused on my end. And he indicated to me that he had not received any new subpoena or any new communication since it was continued. So all that to say, Judge, I will still stand on my place. It is not my job to get their witnesses ready. But beyond that, the whole point is Agent Schwalls was willing to testify, but he was never notified until 2:30 yesterday that anyone even wanted him here today. And so if we can set that up, I did, after all of this happened, I did speak with him about what his availability might be for the rest of the week. As Your Honor knows, we only have a few weeks to get this done because of some leave that I have coming up. But that being said...
Yeah, when is that? That's in April, isn't it?
It starts the end of March, so I'm gone...
Well, what are those dates? I knew you had a leave, but I just don't...
It starts March 27th and extends through April... I think it's through April 12th.
Okay.
That being said, I've had that leave It's actually a vacation I've continued twice because of this trial. And so I've had that some time, and we've known that since we scheduled this meeting. So.
Okay. Anything further on this issue, Ms. Merchant?
No.
Well, I think it is academic, and we'll make every effort to reschedule Agent Shadell's testimony. I do not believe he is in contempt for failing to appear today. So if that ever comes up, that's my ruling in that regard. There's another thing. Go ahead.
Thank you. We're not asking.
All right. There's another thing here that I was concerned. I got this last night from, I think it was Ms. Merchant. Was it you? Best regards, John, your husband. And there was an issue brought up in this communication about Agent Shadell, but also that says, it says also, Judge, it appears the notice of this hearing was not published, so it has not been made public. Perhaps that's changed in the last few hours, but the public and press have a right to notice of this hearing so it doesn't occur in the shadows of our justice system. I don't understand that.
I believe the notice was sent maybe this week or Friday. I'm not really sure. I think the notice was just sent out. Today is Tuesday, maybe yesterday or Friday, but the press.
I sent out this order for pretrial hearings on February the 9th. I don't know what notice is supposed to be sent to the public and the press. Is there some objection that this hearing is?
There's not, Judge.
Well, do you know what do you mean by this? What is
well, the press isn't here, so apparently they have gotten notice, whether it be late or not, but I believe it is published now.
What does that mean is my question.
Publicly available so that the public can search for it and find it.
In the clerk's office?
Yes.
This was filed back in February.
I see the order.
Yeah, I mean, what is he talking about?
We weren't given a copy of this. We actually, Ms. Schwalls just sent it to us, so we didn't know about this being.
Okay, but you don't have any objection to this being some illegally scheduled
No, Judge.
Hearing today?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right, let's just proceed then with the state's motions first. Are y'all prepared to go forward with that?
Judge, we are prepared for that. However, I was going to bring to the court's attention, the only hearing in which we have witnesses here would be the motion to compel hearing, and I didn't know if the court wanted to accommodate those witnesses. That's the defense's motion.
I mean, that's fine. If that would accommodate those witnesses, sure. Are y'all ready to proceed with that? Mr. Gibbs, are you handling that one, or Ms. Merchant?
Is it the motion to compel Mr. McCullough? I'm sorry, witness McCullough.
This is out in Texas? Is that
Yes.
the one you're talking about?
Yes, I'm handling that. Correct.
Well, I mean, I'm fine to handle that now, Judge. Actually, I don't think that has much to do with us. But the motion to compel under the Giglio ruling, what they believe was a deal. There are witnesses here on that case. And I know at least one of those witnesses does have a matter he would like to get to this afternoon if possible.
That'll be fine. Does that suit you to proceed on that one at this time, Ms. Merchant?
Definitely, Judge. Thank you.
All right. Who are your witnesses, Ms. Merchant?
Judge, we have Paul Bowden.
Mr. Bowden, okay.
Bo Dukes.
Mr. Dukes.
John Fox.
All right, is he set for today at 1:30 or tomorrow at 1:30?
Today.
That's what I thought.
He had another.
Ms. Forshe. Okay, today at 1:30? Right, okay, thanks. We're under the belief it was tomorrow, but anyway. Dukes, Fox, and he's available at 1:30, Mr. Fox.
He's available this afternoon. That's what he told me last night.
And okay, great. And Ms. Schwalls.
Ms. Schwalls.
Those are the four that are here today.
Yes, and Ms. Schwalls
all right.
is going to be present at 11, I believe.
She's right there.
Never mind. Ms. Schwalls is here.
All right.
Wonderful.
You want to invoke the rule of sequestration, I'm assuming?
Yes, please.
All right. Yeah.
Yes, we were just
Y'all do too?
And
okay.
Whichever witness the state said had other obligations this afternoon, we're happy to call first. I don't know who that was.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Dukes is out of the presence of the jury. Who do you want to call first?
Well, it's their witness, but Mr. Bowden is the witness who has something he'd like to get to this afternoon.
All right. Ms. Schwalls, if you'll step out until you're called to give your testimony and be reminded of the rule of sequestration, please. Yes. All right. Mr. Bowden, sounds like you're first up this morning. Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm that evidence you're going to provide in the hearing of this case is going to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you so much. Please be seated. If you'll give your attention to Ms. Merchant.
Good morning, Mr. Bowden.
Good morning.
Judge, where would you like me to stand for questioning? Here or
Wherever you're comfortable, you're welcome to use the podium and stand wherever you'd like.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mr. Bowden, how do you know Bo Dukes?
How do I know Bo Dukes?
Yes.
He was involved in the disappearance of Tara Grinstead.
But how did you know him first? When did you first come to meet him?
I knew his family. They live in Irwin County. I have run across him through them occasionally years ago.
Okay, so you had a chance, before the Tara Grinstead case, you had a chance to know Mr. Dukes.
I knew who he was.
You knew who he was. Had you ever personally met him?
Judge, I apologize. I just want to say, Mr. Bowden has not been sworn.
Yes, I have.
Oh, I apologize. I asked other people and they said he wasn't either, so I apologize. Never mind.
Thank you.
Uh,
I may have been introduced to him once years ago. I don't know. If I were to meet him on the street back before all of this case, his involvement in this case came up, I would not have recognized him.
Okay. Did he ever come to your house for any reason?
No.
Did you ever attend any social events with him?
No.
When you went to interview him in this case, tell me how
I did not go to interview him.
When you went to meet with him
Okay.
in person, you met with him in person, correct?
I went to meet with Mr. Fox, but he was there.
Okay. Tell me how that came about.
Agent Shadell had gotten information relative to the Grinstead case that he felt was a valid lead. He had information from, I believe, from Bo Dukes' girlfriend, of some information that Bo Dukes had told her, and Bo Dukes had agreed to be interviewed by Agent Shadell. He was going to be accompanied by Mr. Fox, who was his attorney, and Shadell requested that I be there because John Fox was going to be there.
Okay. And what were you told about this meeting? What was going to be discussed?
I was told that he was supposed to meet and give us an interview.
Give you an interview about Grinstead case?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And had Agent Shadell talked with Mr. Dukes prior to this meeting?
I don't think so.
Did he tell you anything that he anticipated Mr. Dukes would be talking about?
I'm sorry, what?
Did Agent Shadell tell you anything that he anticipated Mr. Dukes would be talking about at this meeting?
He outlined for me what the girlfriend had told him that Dukes had said.
Okay. When you went to meet with Mr. Dukes, who all was present?
Myself, Assistant District Attorney Kim Schwalls from my office, District Attorney Brad Rigby from the Cordell Circuit, John Fox, who was Mr. Dukes' attorney, and Bo Dukes. Agent Shadell was also in the building.
He was in the building, but not in the room.
That's correct.
Was he asked to step out?
No, he excused himself.
He voluntarily excused himself. No one asked him to?
That's my recollection, yes.
Did you? So you did not ask him to step out?
No.
Okay. Tell me how the meeting started. Walk me through the meeting.
Well, we just introductions of who everybody was, kind of had a lull, and I looked at Bo Dukes and I said, I guess you know why we're here, that your girlfriend has relayed to GBI certain things that she says you told her about Tara Grinstead, and that you're here to give us a statement. Is that true? Are you here to be interviewed by GBI? He said yes, that he was agreed to be interviewed, wanted to cooperate. And so at that point, I told him, well, if he was going to cooperate, it was important that he tell us the truth about everything and every person involved, whoever that may be. At that point, we had no name. We did not know your client's name and did not know who might be involved and what their involvement was. I told him that if he fully disclosed and truthfully disclosed, and that he was not involved in the murder, then he could put himself in a position that we may be able to help him somewhere down the road.
That you may be able to help him. I'm sorry, the air kicked in.
Yes.
Help him down the road?
Yes.
Okay. So the agreement specifically was that you could potentially help him down the road if he fully and truthfully disclosed and was not involved in the murder?
It wasn't an agreement. It was an explanation to get him to tell us the truth, to provide us the full truth, and if he did, he could help himself.
So you agreed to help him if he gave you a full statement?
No, I did not.
So you did not agree to help him?
No. I told him that he could put himself in the position that we could help him, if that ever developed.
And by putting himself in a position to help himself, can he give himself a deal?
No.
Can he give himself immunity?
No.
So he would need the state's involvement in order to get immunity or some type of a deal?
Well, yes, we want a recommendation from us for whatever his charges may be. We did not know what his involvement was.
Right.
Didn't know till some days later, really. And a part of what I told him is not only do you have to tell us the truth, but we have to be able to verify it. That is, in fact, true.
Okay. Did you tell him how you would go about verifying?
I did not.
Did you talk to Mr. Fox about Mr. Dukes' testimony and whether or not, if Mr. Dukes was actually needed to testify, that he would have an immunity order to protect him?
As we were getting ready to leave, Mr. Fox asked that if we decided to put Bo Dukes in a grand jury, would I agree to get him a use immunity order, which I told him that I would. I always do that.
You told him you would?
Yes.
So you would agree to an immunity if you put Bo in front of a grand jury?
I would have done that without him asking, but yes.
Do you remember telling Mr. Dukes that you expected him to be honest?
I did.
And not to minimize his involvement?
I did.
Okay. And to tell law enforcement everything that he knew?
That's correct.
Do you remember telling him to be transparent about Ryan's role and that you wanted him to relay the names of everyone he knew?
No, I didn't tell him to be transparent about Ryan's role. I didn't know the existence of Ryan Duke. I told him to be transparent about whoever was involved, because I knew, at least from what he had told his girlfriend, he was contending that he had no involvement in the actual murder himself. And he had not disclosed to her, and we did not know of Ryan Duke's existence at that point. We did, when that testimony that you're reading from took place, we knew, of course, knew of Ryan Duke.
Okay. You asked him to be transparent and participate fully and cooperate in the forensics investigation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when, in exchange for that in exchange for that transparency, you told Mr. Dukes that you would be in a position to help him?
I told him that he would put us in a position to help him, yes.
Okay. And was it immediately after this conversation that you had with him that he implicated Ryan in the death?
He never implicated Ryan in my presence.
He never implicated Ryan in your presence?
Or anyone else.
After this meeting that you all had, where you talked about this being in a position to help himself, was it after that that he spoke with Agent Schaldell and implicated Ryan Duke?
Well, I wasn't there, but yes.
I'm sorry?
I was not present for that interview, but yes, that happened.
Okay, so it's your understanding that immediately following your meeting, you left, Agent Schaldell came in. And so Agent Schaldell wasn't there for when you were talking about being in this position to help him.
That's correct.
You leave. Right after that, Agent Schaldell comes in the same room, and that's when Bo explained that Ryan was involved.
I don't know.
Leading the witness.
Judge, I would ask for permission to lead the witness. I think that we probably have a right under this, since it's a Giglio motion, and we've had previous statements in court that are contrary to what's being testified here today. I think the lead prosecutor on a case where I'm the defense lawyer would classify as someone that I'm able to lead.
You get the last
Judge, he's done nothing to show himself to be contrary to the testimony, and I would obviously object to that idea that he's testified to anything here he hadn't previously testified to.
Well, I think under that scenario, you'd be authorized to lead him. If you can call his attention to a prior occasion, he's made a statement inconsistent with what he's making here. After that, I sustain the objection.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll rephrase it. How soon after you left the meeting with Bo Dukes did Agent Schaldell enter the meeting?
I have no idea.
In your investigation of the case, did you review the interview that Bo Dukes gave to Agent Schaldell?
I reviewed at least one that was given 2 days later.
Okay.
I'm sure I probably looked at the one that took place on that Sunday, but I don't remember the details.
You were the lead prosecutor on this case for many years, correct?
For a while, yes.
Okay. And so what were your duties as a lead prosecutor? Would they include reviewing the entire case file?
I did.
Okay. When we were in court on this motion previously, do you remember being present there?
I don't remember being in court with you on this motion previously.
You do not remember that?
No.
On November 28th, 2008, 2018, when we had our motions hearing, do you remember being present in court on that date?
I don't remember the date. I remember some motion hearings about that time.
And one of those motions was the motion to reveal the deal?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And at that point, you and Ms. Hart, you and Mr. Rigby were all at the table together. Do you remember that?
I'm sure that's probably correct.
And the state announced that as of today's date, there is no deal with any witness in this case that would need to be disclosed under the rules. At this point, there are no deals that have been made. And the court asked if the state acknowledged the requirement to reveal such deals. The state responded yes. The court inquired, none exist now. The state responded, yes, sir. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your position that at that time there were no deals with Mr. Dukes to secure his testimony against Ryan?
That's correct.
Okay. Is it your position that...
Can you share with me that page number?
Oh, yes, of course, Judge. It's page 4 at the November 28th, 2018 motions transcript.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I'm so sorry I didn't do that. I should have done that. Since the day that you met with Bo on that Sunday, have you met with him again?
No.
Have you met with Mr. Fox about any deals for Bo to testify?
No.
Has anyone from your office interviewed Bo Dukes, to your knowledge, while you were prosecuting the case,
No.
interviewed Bo Dukes to get him to testify in this case?
No.
Did he ever have immunity to testify in front of the grand jury?
No.
Was his statement that he gave to Agent Schaldell used instead of his actual testimony?
Used in...
His statement implicating Ryan Duke.
Used in what manner?
Used in order to gain an indictment.
I don't know. I don't recall. I know that Ryan Duke's confession was used. The finding of the physical evidence was used. I'm sure that Schaldell probably testified in summary of what Bo Dukes had told him.
Okay.
As far as playing the statement, I don't think so.
Okay. Just have one moment, Judge.
Sure.
Thank you.
Examination, Ms. Hart?
Yes, sir.
Judge, she's been waiting a long time for this.
Mr. Bowden, how long were you district attorney of the Tifton Judicial Circuit?
28 years.
And prior to being district attorney of the Tifton Judicial Circuit, in what capacity did you work as a lawyer?
First 2 years out of law school, I was an ADA in the Tifton Circuit. I practiced for a year in Savannah and about 10 years in the Walters firm here in Ocilla, and then DA.
Now, at the time of the meeting that occurred in Perry, Georgia, with John Fox and Mr. Dukes, tell us again who all was present in that meeting.
Myself, Kim Schwalls, District Attorney Brad Rigby, John Fox, and Bo Dukes.
And you knew prior to going into that meeting that Bo Dukes had already indicated that he wished to cooperate with law enforcement, correct?
That's correct.
And you knew going into that meeting that Bo Dukes had already indicated that he wished to give a full confession as to his involvement in that death, correct?
He was going to cooperate and give a complete statement.
And in fact, that was the whole purpose of setting up that meeting, was because Bo Dukes wanted to speak with law enforcement.
That's correct.
And the only reason you were present is because Agent Shadell, learning that Mr. Fox was going to be there, asked you to come as well, correct?
That's correct.
At no point during that meeting did John Fox ask you to give Bo Dukes a deal, correct?
That's correct.
At no point during that meeting did John Fox ask you to give Bo Dukes blanket immunity for his crimes, correct?
That's correct.
At no point during that meeting did Bo Dukes ask you to give him any deal, correct?
That's correct.
And at no point during that meeting did Bo Dukes ask you to give him blanket immunity for his crimes in this case, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, Bo Dukes was and has been prosecuted as it relates to this case, correct?
That is correct.
Now, that particular prosecution occurred in the in the Cordell Judicial Circuit.
That is correct.
And because this case implicated both the Tifton Judicial Circuit and the Cordell Judicial Circuit, it's fair to say that Mr. Rigby and yourself worked together on this case from the beginning, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, were you present in the courtroom during the trial of Bo Dukes?
I testified briefly, and I was in the courtroom at that point, but I believe that's all.
Okay. And you're familiar with the fact that following the conviction in that Wilcox County case, that Mr. Dukes was given a 25-year sentence to serve in prison, correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Rigby was the prosecutor on that case.
That's correct.
And I assisted as a special assistant in that case, correct?
That is correct.
And at the time that I was sworn in as a special assistant in the Cordell Judicial Circuit, you were my boss in the Tifton Judicial Circuit, correct?
That's correct.
Defense counsel has asked you about if you were the lead prosecutor in the case. Would it be fair to say that at some point I took over the primary duties in this case?
Yes.
However, everything was obviously run through you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Interviewing of witnesses, is that something that I took the lead on?
Yes.
And so when you indicate that you are unfamiliar these several years later with what Bo testified to, or Bo told Jason Shadell, has it been some time since you personally listened to that interview?
Yes.
And in fact, have you now been retired for over a year?
Yes.
Have you had access to any of the case file since your retirement at the end of 2020?
No.
Now, at the time that you left that meeting in Perry, Georgia, had any deal been made with Bo Dukes?
It had not.
Had any deal been made with John Fox on behalf of Bo Dukes?
No.
Would anyone in the Tifton Judicial Circuit have been in a position to give Bo Dukes any sort of blanket immunity other than yourself?
No, I'm not sure I could in the Cordell Circuit.
I'm sorry?
No.
Okay. And in fact, after the meeting occurred and he was interviewed, it turned out that all of the crimes for which Mr. Dukes was later indicted occurred in the Cordell Judicial Circuit, correct?
That's correct.
Now, defense counsel has asked you about what you've referred to as use immunity, and I know that the court is familiar, but just so the record is clear, is it unusual in the Tifton Judicial Circuit, or was it unusual in the Tifton Judicial Circuit, to give co-defendants use immunity to testify?
No, I did it every time I used a co-conspirator.
And in fact, did you often use that to force testimony of someone who did not wish to testify?
That is correct.
And is use immunity an order that simply comes from the judge indicating that nothing they say during that hearing can be used against them?
That's correct.
And is that a way to get past someone's Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate themselves and force them to testify at times?
That's right.
To your knowledge, other than the meetings that Bo Dukes had with the GBI, has Bo Dukes ever testified in this case?
I don't believe so. I don't think he testified in Wilcox County.
And he certainly has never testified in any hearings related to Ryan Duke, correct?
No.
And to your knowledge, at least as of the time of your retirement, had any use immunity agreement or use immunity order even been signed?
No.
Now, defense counsel has asked you about your comment to Mr. Dukes that if he were to tell the truth, be transparent, and he was not involved in the murder, that you may be in a position to help him, or that he may be in a position to help himself. Is that anything different than what is often said by law enforcement in order to encourage someone to tell the truth?
No.
And at any point did you discuss sentencing with Bo Dukes?
No.
At any point did you discuss charges with Bo Dukes?
No.
At any point did you discuss sentencing with John Fox?
No.
And at no point did you discuss at no point did you discuss charges with John Fox, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, when you left the meeting that day, you had no clue what Bo Dukes was actually going to say, correct?
That's correct.
And you had no clue whether or not he was going to indicate he was involved with the murder, correct?
That's correct.
Except for what his girlfriend had communicated to several different people that got back to Jason Shadell.
That's correct.
May I have just a moment?
Sure.
As of the date of your retirement, December 31st of 2020, did any deal exist with Bo Dukes?
No.
No further questions.
You redirect, Ms. Merchant?
Yes, thank you so much. Mr. Bowden, can you give us some examples of what helping Bo Dukes might mean?
I don't know. To pull something out of the air, I don't know. A plea recommendation is generally what we would have done. There was no way, considering his involvement, that he was going to escape prosecution.
Right.
And if he cooperated and he was responsible for bringing murder to justice, then he could have gotten consideration for that. Subsequent conduct did not bear that out, but that was always a possibility.
Okay. So generally it would be a plea recommendation, some type of a negotiated lesser sentence for his testimony.
Yes.
Typically. Okay. And after you told Bo that you might be in a position to help him, did you also say that only if he was not involved in the murder?
Yes. I did tell him that he had said he was not involved in the murder, was not present at any time in Irwin County. At least that's what he had told his girlfriend. That he would have to not be involved.
So prior to Bo, at that point you said he had not implicated Ryan, right? Bo had not.
Not to me.
Okay. So prior to implicating Ryan, you told him that you might be in a position to help him as long as he was not involved in the actual murder.
That's right.
Okay. And do you remember, I know I asked you earlier about if Agent Shaldell went into an interview immediately after and you couldn't recall. If I showed you the investigative summary from the GBI report, would that help refresh your memory?
I wasn't there. I don't know.
You were there to interview Bo, though, correct?
I was not there to interview Bo, no.
You were there to have a conversation with Bo.
I was there to make a determination if he was going to make a statement to GBI, which he confirmed to me that he was.
Okay. So, and I will try not to call it interview. You were present at the GBI office when words were being spoken between you and Bo Dukes.
Yes.
Okay. And after that, Agent Shaldell interviewed Bo Dukes. Even though you were not in that room, to your knowledge, there was an interview or a conversation that happened after that.
That is correct.
Okay. And you do not remember if that is when Bo implicated Ryan. Is that correct?
To say I definitely remember, no, I don't. But I'm fairly certain he probably did.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory to see the investigative summary?
Perhaps.
May I approach Judge? Thank you. It's just State's Exhibit 1917, the investigative summary. Thank you.
This has been marked out.
So for reference, it is in discovery as State's Exhibit 1917.
Date stamp?
Yes. With the GBI stamps.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to mark it and admit it if we did.
Probably should make sure the record's
Yes, he did. I recall him.
Okay, this helps.
I recall the document.
So it was shortly after your conversation with Bo that he implicated Ryan in the murder of Tara Grinstead.
Yes.
Okay. Bo later was texting with Agent Schaldell. Do you remember that?
I know there were some texts.
Okay. And in one of those texts, he referenced that he got a deal. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember he referenced that he got a deal.
He said, through a long negotiation between Brooke, the case agent, myself, my lawyer, and the DAs, we worked out a deal. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the details, but I remember him saying that he had a deal.
Okay. The state asked about hope of benefit, and that to you, hope of benefit is to encourage someone to tell the truth. Could hope of benefit also be to hopefully get a deal in a case?
I don't know how he would interpret that.
So hope of benefit could be more than just telling the truth. It could also be to help yourself, to have some benefit to yourself.
The only way Bo Dukes could help himself was to tell the truth.
But there's no way to verify whether or not he told the truth, correct?
There is some verification of that, yes.
Just 1 moment. Just 1 moment, Judge. Thank you. Approach a witness when you want to talk to them and you want to give them some type of benefit in exchange for their testimony. How would you normally have approached that?
I don't.
Had you ever had another opportunity?
I approach it through their attorney.
Through their attorney. Okay.
That was not what was going on with Bo Dukes. I wanted a determination whether or not he was going to tell us, did he in fact come there to cooperate, give us a statement, and if he did, was he going to tell the truth? It was not a conversation. His responses were yes or no, or yes sir or no sir.
Have you had other opportunities where a defense lawyer asked you for immunity in exchange for their client testifying?
I'm sure I have over 28 years.
And
I'm talking about use immunity now, not blanket immunity, not transactional immunity.
And but John Fox didn't ask you for use immunity. He asked you for immunity.
Well, he asked for use immunity.
Did he specify use immunity?
Oh no.
No? Just immunity?
Yes.
Okay. So he asked for immunity in exchange for his client giving you a statement?
Yes.
And you agreed that if Bo testified, you would give him immunity?
I agreed I would give him use immunity if I put him in a grand jury, yes.
Did you specify to Mr. Fox the difference in your mind between use and transactional immunity?
No, but the only immunity, statutory immunity in Georgia is use immunity. There's no transactional immunity in the statutes.
But you can effectively give him immunity by not charging or by giving him a plea deal, correct?
Theoretically, yes.
So the typical situation when you're trying to get someone to talk through the defense lawyer, if you agreed to give them some benefit, it would be some type of a plea deal, some type of a lesser sentence.
Yes.
And you've done that previously?
Yes. You understand, I wasn't trying to get Bo Dukes to talk. He came there to talk to us.
I understand, yes. He orchestrated that meeting, correct?
I don't know who orchestrated it, but that's why he came there.
Testimony could not be later used against him at trial, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, in this case, if you were discussing transactional immunity, Mr. Rigby would have been the one who had to give that to Bo Dukes, correct?
That is correct.
Now, defense counsel asked you about whether or not the statement that Bo Dukes, or the time that Bo Dukes gave Ryan's name was after your meeting with Mr. Fox and Bo Dukes. Let me clarify. Throughout the course of your working on this case, have you learned that in fact Bo Dukes has already named Ryan as the murderer in this case to multiple people?
Yes.
And he had done that over a number of years, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, did you learn that Bo Dukes and Ryan had specifically indicated that Ryan murdered her just a few weeks after she went missing?
That is correct.
She asked you about verification. You said that there is some verification of his statement to law enforcement, correct?
That's correct.
That being Bo Duke's statement to law enforcement, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, Ryan Duke, when he was interviewed, specifically his confession also indicated that Bo Dukes had nothing to do with the murder, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
No further, Ms. Merchant.
I just want to clarify, the state just asked you a lot about immunity. That didn't come up until the end of the conversation with Bo Dukes, correct?
Came up as we were getting ready to leave.
Right. So the conversation that you had with him where you told him that if he fully and truthfully disclosed and was not involved in the murder, he would put himself in a position for you to help him. That was before the immunity talk happened,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the immunity talk was really more with his lawyer, not with Bo.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Nothing further.
Any reason Mr. Bowden shouldn't be excused going
No,
back?
sir. We'd ask you to be excused.
Thanks for your
No,
testimony, Mr. Bowden. Good to see you. You'll be excused at this time. Let's go ahead and mark that exhibit, please, Ms. Merchant, before we forget about it.
Call it,
Call it D, yeah, let's call it, what's that, 8/38/22 D1, how about that?
the day of the one.
All right. I'll tell you next.
We will call Ms. Schwalls.
All right, Kim Schwalls, please. Good morning, Ms. Schwalls. Before you're seated, please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the evidence you're going to provide in the hearing of this matter is going to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. Give your attention to Ms. Merchant. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Schwalls. How are you today?
Hi, Ms. Merchant. Good, thank you.
Good. Thank you for being here. Your name used to be Miss Whiddon, correct?
That's correct, my maiden name.
So if some other reports mention Whiddon, Whiddon, that's you.
That should be me, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Were you involved in a meeting with Bo Dukes and Mr. Rigby, Mr. Bowden, Mr. Fox, and Agent Sheldell? Were you involved in a meeting that happened?
Yes, I was there.
Okay. And how were you involved in the case at that point?
I was not involved in the case and haven't really been involved since. I was just going along for the ride because Mr. Bowden asked me to.
Okay, so did you work for Mr. Bowden at the time?
I did. I was an assistant district attorney specifically in the Tifton office, and I was hired in 2011 and have worked really only Tifton cases from that point forward.
Okay. And why did Mr. Bowden ask you to tag along?
Not being coy, but you may have to ask Mr. Bowden. I don't really know what his specific reason was. I assumed that I was more available possibly than the other members of our staff at the time, but I don't know a specific reason.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you all discussed it and you were just there to be a witness or anything like that.
We didn't discuss that.
Okay, great. How did you get to the meeting?
I rode with Mr. Bowden.
Did you discuss the case on the way?
I don't know that we did. I cannot recall discussing it in any detail on the way.
Did you know where you all were going and what you were going to do?
I do recall he called me on Saturday and asked me to go somewhere with him for a meeting and asked me to keep it confidential. So I knew it was something important. But I cannot recall if I learned, I think I learned during the ride what we were doing, where we were going. So I do think I learned during the ride that it was about the Tara Grinstead case.
Okay. Did you learn what you were going to be discussing with Mr. Dukes?
I don't recall if I did know that at that time.
Did you discuss any potential bargaining strategies or deals or anything like that? Or
Absolutely not, no.
any strategies on how to interview Mr. Dukes?
No.
When you arrived at the interview, who all was present?
Well, I can tell you who was present. I wouldn't actually call it an interview, but
The meeting.
But the meeting, yes. Mr. Bowden, of course, was with me. Mr. Brad Rigby was there. Attorney for Mr. Bo Dukes, correct.
John
Mr.
Fox.
Dukes, Mr. Fox, yes, he was also there. And Agent Jason Scheidel was there and met us at the entryway. May have been, I don't know that he was in the room with us when we met with Mr. Fox and Mr. Dukes.
Okay.
He may have stepped out,
Okay.
but those were the people there.
Is it common for the GBI agent to step out when you all are having a conversation with someone like Mr. Dukes?
I cannot tell you because that was really a unique situation. I have not been in another situation to give an answer to that, so I can't say.
Okay, thank you. So Agent Scheidel stepped out, and those folks that you named, you all were in an interview room together.
That's correct.
A meeting room.
A meeting room, yes.
Okay. And can you walk me through what happened during that meeting? Like how it began?
I can tell you what I recall as
Yes,
best
please.
I recall it. I don't recall whether Mr. Bowden spoke first or Mr. Fox did. My memory is simply that there was a cordial meeting about the fact that Mr. Dukes had information that he wanted to convey about Ms. Grinstead's disappearance, and that Mr. Bowden didn't really ask questions, if I recall. We weren't interviewing him at the time. It was just a meeting, an initial meeting to meet with Mr. Fox and Mr. Dukes, because my understanding was that Mr. Dukes had asked to do so. That was my view, that he had wanted to meet to tell his story, if you will.
So Mr. Dukes wanted this meeting.
That was my understanding.
Okay. And what was your understanding as to why Mr. Fox was there?
Just as an attorney representing Mr. Dukes, I'm assumed that Mr. Dukes thought it was in his best interest to do so, to have a representation there.
Okay. Do you remember how the conversation began?
I do not.
Do you remember what Mr. Bowden said to Mr. Dukes? Well, let me back up. Did Mr. Bowden know Mr. Dukes prior to this meeting?
I don't know. I don't know. I assume he did not know him well, if he knew him at all. I cannot say.
When you all entered the room, did it appear as though they were familiar with each other?
No, I don't recall that.
You don't recall, or no?
I can't say. I don't recall them appearing familiar with each other.
Okay. Do you recall what Mr. Bowden said to Mr. Dukes during that meeting?
I know that I recall Mr. Bowden telling Mr. Dukes that he, in some form, that he expected him to be truthful and cooperative with the investigation if he had information. And that really is almost the bulk of what I remember from that meeting as far as what Mr. Bowden said.
Do you remember any conversation about that Mr. Bowden might be in a position to help Mr. Dukes if he was honest?
That's possible. I don't recall that language, so I can't say specifically.
Okay. Do you remember any conversation with Mr. Bowden and Mr. Dukes about him wanting Mr. Dukes to fully and truthfully disclose, and that if he was not involved in the murder, he might be in a position to help himself?
I can also remember that language. I do recall him telling him they expect him to be fully honest, cooperative, fully truthful, but I don't recall anything specific about being in a position to help himself if he did so. That's possible.
As a longtime prosecutor, if someone told a suspect that if they were truthful or disclosed, that the prosecutor might be in a position to help them, what would that mean to you?
In my view, it would mean that the prosecutor would take into consideration how beneficial the information was, how truthful and cooperative at the end of all things he or she thought that the defendant was, and then may be in a position to provide a lesser plea offer or some resolution in the case that would not be, let's say, the maximum. Okay. That would be my belief or understanding.
Great.
If that were said.
Were you present when Mr. Fox asked Mr. Bowden if he could get an immunity deal?
I believe that I was. I do believe that use immunity was referenced. I don't know if Mr. Fox asked for such, but I think use immunity was referenced, yes.
Did you, in preparing to testify here today, did you speak with the state at all about your testimony or this meeting?
I really did not. Ms. Hart called me a few months ago, just after I think I received the first subpoena, and I think asked me if I knew or recalled Mr. Bowden making any sort of, or knew anything about that, making any sort of deal, and I told her that he did not make such a deal. And that was pretty much the extent of our conversation, I think.
Is there anything else about the conversation that you had where Mr. Dukes was present? Anything else you can remember about it?
Truly all I remember is Mr. Bowden asking him to be truthful, and I remember that Mr. Dukes was emotional. That was all I really can get from it, and that the meeting was just a cordial meeting, and it wasn't very long.
Do you remember Agent Schwalls coming in and taking over once you all were done?
Yes.
That was immediately after?
I think so, yes.
Is that normal that when you interview a suspect, the agent would leave while the attorneys are talking and then the agent comes back after? Is that normal?
Again, I have never been in a situation remotely like this one to tell you that, so I can't say.
Fair enough. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Hart or Mr. Reed,
Thank you, Judge. When we spoke a few months ago, did we discuss the fact that there was a transcript of Mr. Bowden's prior testimony in reference to this issue?
Oh, yes, you did.
Have you had a chance to read that testimony?
No.
In fact, you declined to read that testimony, correct?
I did, that's true, yes.
So your testimony here today, have you, let me ask this, you didn't know until yesterday you were testifying today, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so have you discussed your testimony with anyone prior to coming to testify today?
Other than being asked questions by people who are, curious in the office as to why would I be receiving, a subpoena or be here at all, no.
Okay. And when you left that day, what was your impression of whether or not a deal had been reached with Bo Dukes?
Very certain that there was no deal reached with Bo Dukes, nor discussed. So none reached and none discussed.
And as I know you said that at some point use immunity was discussed, but you don't know how it was brought up.
Right.
When that discussion occurred, with your years of experience, were you familiar what kind of immunity they were discussing?
Yes.
Did it ever appear to you that they were discussing any sort of blanket or transactional immunity?
No, and the term in fact was use immunity. I don't know that we called it use and derivative immunity, but it was called, as I recall, use immunity.
And you would agree with me that Bo Dukes was never offered, or there was never any discussion about what Bo Dukes would be charged with, correct?
Correct.
There was never discussion about what sort of sentence Bo Dukes would receive, correct?
Correct.
And it sounds like what you recall specifically is that Mr. Bowden told Bo he expected him to cooperate fully and be truthful.
That's yes, that's what I mostly remember.
May I have just a moment? Ever had a chance to listen to or read the summary related to the interview that Bo later gives to Jason Shadell?
No, I have not.
And other than that particular date, attending that short meeting, have you had really any involvement with this case since then?
I ended up at maybe it was a press conference that I was asked to be at, and I stood. But other than that, I've had absolutely no involvement in this case, no.
Thank you.
Ms. Merchant, any follow-up?
Oh, yes, Judge. Do you remember Mr. Bowden saying that if Bo told the truth and fully disclosed and was not involved in the murder, that he would be in a position to help them?
I do not recall that specifically. The language you just used about if he was not involved in the murder, that sounds like something that maybe have been referenced, but I don't recall that language specifically, so I can't tell you.
Do you remember the language, though, that Mr. Bowden would be in a position to help Mr. Dukes?
I don't specifically remember that, no.
Thank you. Oh, was the meeting recorded?
Not that I know of. I don't recall seeing anyone with a recorder, no. And I was not aware of being recorded at the time, so not that I know of.
And was this in a GBI interview room?
It was in, I don't know what a GBI interview room specifically looks like, directly, but it was in I would call it a meeting room or conference room.
In your experience, do those meeting rooms have the ability to record?
Interview rooms do. I don't know whether the conference rooms do or not.
At that field location where this meeting took place, was there the capability of being in a room that was recorded?
I don't know. I don't know what that particular agency office has and where. That's the first time I've been there.
When your meeting concluded, Agent Schwalls came into the same room, right?
I think so.
So if that part was recorded, is it safe to assume that there was recording capabilities in that room?
I don't know if he interviewed him in that room. I just recall him meeting back up with us, maybe stepping into the room, but I don't know if an interview occurred there or not.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Ms. Harper?
No, Your Honor.
Any reason Ms. Schwalls shouldn't be excused?
No, Judge. Thank you. No, Judge.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Schwalls. You'll be excused at this time.
Thank you,
Go about
Judge.
your business.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anybody need a break?
No, Judge. No, Your Honor.
All right. Call your next witness, please.
We have Mr. Rigsby, but then also Mr. Dukes, if we want to tell the sheriff, maybe 30 minutes from him.
Okay. Is Mr. Dukes represented by counsel in this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
In this case?
In this case?
In Osceola or in the case that's pending against him in Ben Hill County?
I didn't know there was a case pending against him in Ben Hill.
There is. He's
Let
been
me ask
charged
you this
with
way.
it.
Does he have counsel for his testimony here today?
I don't believe so.
I have no idea. I
No, no?
reached out to
Okay.
Mr. Fox. I know that Mr. Fox does not represent him. There was nothing on any of the dockets indicating, and I couldn't ask him prior to today.
Judge, the public defender's office represents him in the charges pending in Ben Hill County as well as on his appeal in Wilcox County. And they have done entries of appearance in both Ben Hill County and Wilcox County.
He just needs to be advised of his rights. And if he doesn't have counsel, I'm required to do that. So I will do that. And I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted to...
And I believe he may be here prior to that last testimony. I asked him to go and have him en route. Has he made it yet?
Is Mr.
He's on his way.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I don't know if he has counsel or not, but I would assume it's not the public defender since they represented Mr. Duke previously. It's got to be conflict counsel. I don't know who it is.
Judge, it's a different circuit. It is
Okay.
the public defender's office
Right,
that represents
that'd be the
him.
Cordell Circuit. This is the TIF Circuit. So. All right. Call your next witness, please.
Mr. Rigby.
Mr. Reed.
Judge, Mr. Rigby was previously served a subpoena back in August, I believe, and we had prepared a motion to quash that subpoena. However, when the hearing never took place, we didn't file the motion to quash because it became moot. And he had not been contacted about their intent to call him today. And so at this time, we would be filing a motion to quash. Do you have a copy of this? I don't. I'll show it to defense counsel. And Mr. Rigby actually, I believe, would like to address the court. Is that correct, Mr. Rigby?
Judge, I would just say that there's a case law directly on point where there's the prosecutor on the case, where the evidence is available by other witnesses, which has already been testified to by Ms. Schwalls and Mr. Bowden at the same meeting. That the prosecutor that's on the case under Cushion v. 2016, 300 Georgia 190, the court may deny and quash the subpoena.
Let's let Ms. Merchant get up to speed. If you don't mind, please share that case with her.
I'd like a copy of the motion as well.
Yeah, I'll get us some copies made of this motion. We'll be in recess for about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Judge.